Yo, what is up everyone? It's Mini TV here, coming back at you once again with another video. I know I've been gone for a while, but there's been a new patch and there's so much to break down. So this video is going to sort of try and talk about all the main and interesting points and things to keep a lookout in the new 7.3 patch. So let's jump into it. So I think the first thing to talk about really is quickly there's some quick general changes that I think will definitely have quite a big impact going in to any kind of gameplay going in. I think the first main one is the second Roshan no longer dropping cheese. Normally, the second Roshan was whoever team kind of won and got the second Roshan would end up winning the game. It had something like an 80% win rate. And a large part of it is because you almost had like two Aegises, because you had one on the Aegis and then you had the cheese on the second core as well. And it was far too strong. So the second cheese no longer dropping cheese. I'm assuming it's going to be the third Rosh will drop cheese along with the shard as well. It is just far too strong. So that being gone, I think is a really big impact going forward. I think overall the item changes. I think Aeon Disc was quite a big one, an item that was probably very overly purchased, very, very strong. And with this cooldown now, there's a big aspect to it where you want to be triggering enemies' Aeon Discs because of that increase in cooldown. It's 105 to start with, but can be up almost to 3 minutes. So really triggering that, I think, is really important. A big buff to Arcane Boots as well, an item that was getting picked up quite a bit, and with this another buff as well, it's even stronger. So I think that's something to note. Another notable item I think is Bottle. Before in the last patch, it was just anyone could play mid and anyone could do well on it as long as they had a bottle, because you could just kind of continually recharge mana and health with it. With this nerf, I think we'll still see a lot of bottle mids, but it's not going to be as impactful as if you play someone that doesn't play bottle. But I think with both double bounties and the water runes as well, bottle was still a must. It's just no longer as strong. I think Falcon Blade I think is an interesting one. I think it's going to be picked up a bit more, but only by the heroes that would normally pick up anyway, which is normally ranged agility carries, because they need the mana and they need the health as well. And it's been buffed like 2 or 3 times now in a row, but still for a 1.1k net worth, Dragon Lance is probably still your go-to. Hammer Overlord I think is a really interesting item as well. I want to touch upon because a lot of these offlaners were looking to build Helm of Dominator, like you see in some Tide Hunters, some Brewmasters, obviously the Beastmasters as well. They pick up this Helm of Dominator really early, and it would be a great way of kind of getting some kind of power control, easily able to take the T1 tower with it, but it would fall off dramatically. Now with this being kind of put into the Vlads, it now is a useful item to build early, because you're no longer going to sell it because it's going to be built into something else. And so and the recipe only being 1,000 gold, there's a lot of value just in the item in itself, which I think is really interesting. I think the final and another item that I think is really important is Mageslayer. I think the item is now going to be picked up a lot. I think it's really, really strong, particularly for ranged spellcasters that don't really want to buy a BKB, and there's definitely some really scenario and situational picks that this item could be really good against certain heroes. So heroes like Bristleback, heroes like Leshrac, heroes that really rely a lot on their spells to deal damage, and that kind of get up in the face of it, can really be nullified from this one item that only costs 2,400 gold. So I think keep an eye out for Mageslayer, as I think it's really good. The final item I think that's really important to mention is Silver's Edge. I think this item is very, very strong now. I know we kind of meme about it in the lower ranks where people weren't buying sentries or dust, and people would just use it as like a getaway clause, whereas now it's a really strong item that I think can really synergize well with carries or even mids that don't necessarily need a lot. Some heroes really need certain items to be useful, but if you've got a hero that has a good kit and can benefit from the crit, and I think just the utility from Invis can really help get rid of dodge wards and etc. I think this item is really, really strong on heroes like we used to sort of see it on Troll Warlord, for example. Another notable hero that's going to be really good on is Conqueror as well, because the crit is on that last attack, so it can do some really big numbers. Even Earthshaker, for example, as well. Some of the neutral item changes I think are quite interesting. I think Blast Read can be really good, particularly if you're playing against a melee carry, because that 100% blind is something to really keep a note of, and that can be really useful against melee heroes. Like, so for example, Ursa, you might need to be enraging off just the blind, because those 2.5 seconds can make a big difference. I think Brigand's Blade is really strong as well, because the attacks deals not only on heroes but also on creeps as well. So this is kind of almost like the new and perhaps improved Imp Claw. So I think that's really something to keep an eye on as well. As for, there's obviously nerfs to Flicker and Spider Legs. I think they're a lot more just balanced now, put simply. Flicker no longer being able to kind of use it as a getaway clause, and Spider Legs no longer being used as its own independent boot slot for a carry, I think is really important. As for a few heroes that I think are quite important to mention, obviously AA got his laning stage nerfed, which I think is kind of important because the hero was strong in laning phase and also in team fights. A hero that I want to mention is Anti-Mage, because I kind of think this hero can work as an offlaner. We're starting to sort of see, I know KZ was playing in the offlane, Vanguard and Echo Saber, for example. But now with the Shard as well as the Ag Scepter, I think this hero can be used a lot more in a kind of utility sense, perhaps even in a position 4, because of its mobility and because of its ability to kind of drain mana as well from afar without committing too much with the Ags as well. Something that I think is really interesting to note. Bane got a big buff as well. I think a hero is going to be really strong this patch, because its laning phase is back to its strength, because the mana cost from Brain Sap has been reduced, and also the cast point quickly on Fiend Script as well, and also the pure damage onto Nightmare targets, I think is something kind of cool to note as well. I think Bounty Hunter can be really strong this patch as well. I think even though the damage Shuriken Toss has been reduced, the mana cost is so low that I think you can almost max it in lane and can cause a real problem, since it's only on a 5-second cooldown as well. Pair that with some of its talents as well. I think position 3 Bounty Hunter or even position 4 Bounty Hunter is something that we're going to see a lot as well. So keep an eye out for that. Brewmaster ulti as well, I think is quite interesting. Now, obviously, having the Shards Broodling giving the attack modifiers can be really interesting. I think I played it once with Echo Saber, and the Broodling Void is like, I think there's an interesting interaction where it's bugged, and it's like you continually slowing with Echo Saber. Broodmother got kind of completely demolished. I think there's an interesting thing with the Scepter, but overall, the hero is no longer as elusive and strong with the spinwares, because it no longer gets if you're trying to gank the Broodmother, it can no longer run away with 20% HP, because it's a lot slower now altogether. I think Clinks, the change on Clinks with Q is an interesting change as well. I think the playstyle of Clinks is going to be completely remodeled, where no longer you're this kind of stealthy assassin that you go around killing supports, but more almost as a sieger and a kind of a DPS glass cannon in the back with things like Burning Barrage as well. So that'll be an interesting one. I think Dawnbreaker, I think, is really strong now as well. It makes sense why it hasn't been added to Captain's mode. Having the Starbreaker no longer being interrupted by Root, and the Shards now giving Magic Immunity as well, is something that I think we'll see a lot. Plus, a lot of the talents are very strong and have been improved as well. Something to mention. DK got nerfed quite heavily. I think Ags was a core part of his kit. And with that being reduced heavily, I don't think we'll see this hero as much as we previously did. Flame Guard on Ember Spirit, I think, is really big, simply because of the level 1. Flame Guard normally would get instantly taken off by almost any other mid laner, but with now being 110, I think his laning stage is going to be a lot better, and he can get through those really tough lanes that I think is quite important. An interesting note about Faceless Void as well, I think the support Faceless Void is back and actually better than ever, put simply. Not only has the cooldown been reduced on ultimate in higher levels, so that he's always being able to use this big teamfight spell, but his talents like the time dilation and damage per second, the time walk cooldown, for example, time dilation, slow cooldown, basically his talents were more suited and kind of geared towards carry, whereas now each talent basically for the most part has some kind of support mechanic into the talent tree. So something that I think is really, really cool and really, really interesting as well. Another really notable hero, I think, is Keeper of the Light as well. Base armor increased by 1, huge for laning stage potential because a lot better at trading. And with the Illuminate now doing full damage, but having 1 second less channel time, is huge because it's 1 less second. Because in that 1 second, if you're channeling for 4 seconds, normally, more often than not, you will miss the target. But with it channeling 1 second less, as well as the reduction in cooldown from Chakra Magic, I think Keeper of the Light is going to be a really big position 5 hero to watch out for. Same goes for Conqueror as well. I think the mid Conqueror, particularly because of the Shadow Blade and Silver's Edge change, I think is a hero that we will see a lot going forward, which I think is really, really cool as well. Other notable heroes as well to mention is most likely Monkey King as well, a hero that was almost given his old shard just because the cast point and the travel speed increase both were just given to him naturally, as well as slight buffs to his Jingle Mastery. That I think overall this hero I think we're going to see a lot more played going forward as well. Other notable heroes that I think is quite cool to think about and look. I mean, just because it's Pudge, we've got to mention it. Obviously, the Meat Hook now instantly killing any hero, any creep that isn't an ancient is actually quite important because it's kind of similar to how Morana would be playing. You know, if you're playing as a position 4, trying to get some. If you're close to an item or if you've got nothing else to do, you can go around kind of jungling in that respect, which I think is quite big. And an interesting thing to note as well is the interaction here with Pudge and also with the new item, or not new item, but with Helm of Overlord as well. A lot more heroes are going to be picking up Helm of Dominator, and now having the ability to instantly kill it with Pudge is actually quite a big thing because of the gold bounty you get from the hook. So something that's kind of small, but I think is actually quite interesting and cool to look at as well. Other notable heroes I think is quite interesting and important to note is also like Timbersaw. Important to note in that the hero I don't think is really able to be played anymore. The Q and the W that was so integral to his ability and threatening kind of stage in the laning phase is now kind of gone. Big nerfs to both the Q and the W. Yes, he's still hard to kill with his E, but he does no longer really provide that same kind of threat. So you can almost more easily ignore him because of the changes to Q and W. Tinker was a big change, huge change really. I think because of this change altogether, we will see different potentially off lane or even position 4 Tinkers because of the defense matrix now being its E-spell and the March Machines being a shard ability in itself. And with a keen conveyance as well, like you don't need to buy boots for travel. So this is going to really change the way Tinker's been played, and it'll be interesting to keep a note on why and how that's going to change going forward as well. Other than that, few things. Vengeful swaps, Nether swap was kind of buffed in some ways because it's just a better saving mechanic now because both her and the ally she swaps will take 50% less damage at max level and 30 and 40 in the lower levels as well. Something that can just make a big difference if you're saving them from a slow or saving them from like a dot, that they'll be taking a lot less damage going forward as well. And I think the one other notable hero alongside Void Spirit that has also been buffed, this hero relies so much on his spells and just having changes to mana cost and increase them together, and with 100 astral step debuff, considering you have 2 steps, is actually a big buff considering the hero wasn't played all that much. Last patch most of the spirits were nerfed, but with both Void Spirit and Ember Spirit it's going to be cool. But the last hero I think kind of mentioned is actually Zeus actually. Kind of a pub favourite for the most part, even though it got nerfed last patch. Just small buffs to his mana cost, as well as to some of his other spells, I think will more likely see him played as well. Considering that level 25 talent as well, AoE Lightning Bolt, huge really, has so much AoE damage that I think we might see him a lot more. Another notable kind of hero that will probably fall off a lot is Wraith King with his reincarnation as well. Even though it's only 20-second increased cooldown, that 40 to 60 seconds is a huge margin of error. Normally, every fight you'd always have your ultimate up, even at max level, whereas now there's really a timing window that you can play around with that, and I think the hero is not going to see much play because of it. So that was just a quick, brief overview of some of the most important integral patch parts of the patch that I thought. There's going to be more videos coming up about what heroes are best in certain roles after I've had more time to sort of digest the patch. But other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you in the next one. Till then, keep ironing and grinding. Peace.